Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, the 25th anniversary episode. No, not ours. Not yet. We got a little while. But I'm running every day to stay healthy and drinking smoothies. No, the 25th anniversary of Star Trek and the special edition. We got together to watch it and to talk about it. It was special. This episode is special. You're special. The 25th anniversary is special, and It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. As you can see, your regular hosts are all here.
This is Stephen.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. We are here to talk about Star Trek, the 25th anniversary, which we just watched on VHS.
We did. We literally went back in time.
We did. I don't know where you can find it streaming. You probably can't. So if you want to watch it before you hear us talk, go get a VHS on eBay or something.
No, just find out where Jimmy moves to eventually, and you can.
Hey, you can come over. Just email Jim at ibdpresents.com. We'll set up a.
Looks like if you go, you can find it on YouTube.
So yeah, I bought the DVD or the VHS when it came out and watched it a whole bunch of times. Was this your first viewing, both of you, of this special?
Yes.
Pretty sure.
First impressions.
So wait, I'm sorry, just to go back a bit. So however old you were at the time, you actually got the VHS when it came out, like literally like.
I would have been like 9. I don't think I got like opening day, but I remember we'd go to Media Play and I'd be able to get books occasionally, and almost never a movie, but they allowed me to get that VHS. My parent at that point, it definitely would have had to be talking my parents into buying it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I probably got it came out. The special aired in 91, like September. We established the VHS came out at least after October because Roddenberry died, and they added a tribute to him at the end on the VHS. So I probably didn't get it till the first of the year. Maybe it was Christmas money or something. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely got it. So first impressions.
I think we all mentioned it was a product of its times in certain ways, but it was there was good to be had from it. There was some useful information, I thought.
Yeah, I knew it'd be cheesy or whatever, but I thought it was a lot more fun than I expected. And on one of our drink breaks, Jimmy and I talked about if this was on at home, I'd watch this. I'd end up watching the entire thing probably.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I want to see this next part. I thought the montages were good. I thought the spirit was right. There were parts that were like, okay, they go to the space camp, which was still interesting, but it was still like, that's a cheesy segue, but it was still like, okay, you know what, I'm going to give you that as long as you give me what I want, which is clips from the old show and the new show. And
I think it's cool they partnered with NASA and put a little bit of that into it.
Yeah, because that's always been kind of a part. They started, they had the John F. Kennedy, we'll go to the moon clip, and it's like, they do share DNA. That's just a fact.
Yeah, I said I watched it a bunch of times as a kid. I really enjoyed it then. I have not watched it probably in 20 years, and did not hold up quite as well as I'd hoped. I don't regret making you guys watch it because I think it's a valuable tool of, again, product of its time to put ourselves in the right mindset and everything for what it was. But maybe some of my love for it as a kid came from the fact that there wasn't a lot of Star Trek that I could get my hands on at the time. I might get a few episodes of Next Gen or the original series of the public library on VHS, but not a lot. I certainly wasn't allowed by my parents to keep buying episodes. I think the only other VHS I might have owned around this time was The Cage, and then this.
Yeah.
I still have The Cage VHS tape somewhere. But yeah, so this was something, because you only have what you have, I watched this along with the movies over and over again.
And like with the old series and even TNG and the animated series, but more TNG and TNG. Speaking of which, I'll come back to that. There's some problematic things. Gene Roddenberry.
Oh my goodness.
I guess we could go launch into that.
The great bird of the galaxy, God bless him. But, yeah.
Well, he talks about having a black. He talks about Asians and how they've contributed.
And they're great. I love those people.
Yeah. It definitely felt like he was trying very hard to be inclusive and progressive, and his heart was in the right place. And for his time, I don't think most television producers were not speaking like that. He was being more progressive than most.
Yes.
However, the language he was using in the context of today, not so appropriate.
Yeah.
Every time he opened his mouth after that, I was expecting him to say something vaguely racist, unintentionally vaguely racist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But seemed like a nice guy.
I'll even say it to his credit. It's not even that out of character for the time that this was airing.
I thought you
not
were going
at
to say,
all.
I'd even say it to his dead face.
Oh,
I'm
God.
glad you went a different direction.
I don't want to see his dead face by now.
No. R.I.P.
I'm
R.I.P.
sure I did not notice that element of it when I was
I'm
watching
sure
it
I
in the
wouldn't have
90s.
either.
But in the
I think
90s,
we
I
would
was
have
probably
thought like, oh, that's a nice
yeah,
gesture.
very nice.
Yeah. Very
So
nice thing to say.
magnanimous
Yeah,
would be the
yes,
word if you
yes.
if you had known the word
Yes.
at the time.
Now it seems patronizing.
Yes.
I know
Yes.
the word, but I still don't really know what it means. So yeah, that's what I would have said.
It was such a bold and grand and
Gesture, yeah. It was a yes.
As
Yeah.
far as the right.
It's
He
funny.
he didn't have to do that, but he did.
It's funny to think of the time. At the time this aired, the animated series was not acknowledged as canon, which was why there was no mention or shot of it.
Right.
They even mentioned Phase
Really?
2.
Oh, you're right.
They even mentioned Phase 2 in this, the series that never happened. But Roddenberry insisted the animated was not canon. We should all forget about it. It was only later that other people were like, no, we want to remember it and
Yeah, I
bring
wrote
it back
down
into the canon.
No TAS. But
No, that was just how Roddenberry's attitude for it. I think
And-
after his death,
yeah,
they...
and we've talked about
Yeah.
the animated series was not great by any means, but there were some cool elements.
I wonder if they even had the concept of canon back then.
That's a good question.
I mean, for series and properties in general.
No, they did.
I guess,
canon.
but I mean, after, because I feel like Star Trek might have been one of the first, and I think we've talked about this, where people watched it repeatedly.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I've seen it. I mean, does it matter if, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here too, but does it matter I Love Lucy, whether something's coming out? It probably does, but maybe not as much as, I don't think people watch those episodes repeatedly.
Yeah.
But they probably didn't break it down as much.
Would there have been like I Love Lucy fan fiction?
Or conventions.
Or yes.
Somebody somewhere wrote I Love Lucy fan fiction, I'm sure.
I'm sure they.
I don't know about conventions, but somebody somewhere wrote fan fiction. Yeah, so when you think about it, there were three seasons of the original series, 4 seasons of Next Gen, and 5 movies. That's not a... back then, that seemed like a lot of Trek. Right now, that doesn't seem like a lot of Trek.
You're right.
There's so much more ahead than there is behind at this point.
Yep.
Even for this next 10 years era.
Yeah, I thought as we started, I'm like, oh, we've covered 25 years of Star Trek already.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got a lot
We
more to
have.
go in
We have.
5
Yeah,
years.
The next 10 or 15, it was very prolific. And then we had a big break.
Yeah, and I was thinking during this whole period, because I have to mention Star Wars, as we know, Star Wars was, other than, they hadn't even done the re-releases yet. Star
Right.
Wars was just,
Yeah.
Star
It
Wars
was 3
mostly
films.
fanfic.
It was
yeah.
3 films.
Yeah. Which,
And books that they did consider canon until they started making
Until
more
they-
films,
yeah.
and then they wiped them out, which is really bad to consider something canon and then knock it out of the canon. I
Yeah.
don't like that at
Yeah.
all.
Wondered about that.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Comic books, probably Star Wars. Then
Yeah,
remember
I
if,
think there's still some of that.
I didn't really read any of those, but I mean, I became aware of the existence
Yeah.
of that. So yeah, it's to bring it back to the what they were saying. It's they were. It's like they were proud of how much they had done,
Yeah.
and it's funny. It's humorous and mind blowing to consider like how much more there was to come.
Yes.
That they would have probably blown their minds if they'd known.
Yeah. Well, when they air the 100th anniversary special and you two are dead, I will have a drink over your... No.
Well, Jimmy and I talked about, he says there's a 30th one coming up, and I felt, and he said that's much better. And I thought the 25th was like, this is for
Fans.
the those of you who've been here all along. Good job. And then the 30th one was like, this is for everybody.
I'm not saying necessarily it's better. It's just a lot more polished.
Yes.
It's
yeah,
a stage. They're on a stage.
Yeah.
They're in a hall with an audience. There's presentations. There's Kenny G playing. There's a sketch that happens on stage.
And there was
there's-
probably
yeah.
some rush in this because it was definitely to tie into the
Yes.
Undiscovered Country.
Well, and they were talking about how they kind of rushed the Undiscovered Country to
Yeah.
meet the 25th anniversary
Yeah.
deadline, which does not feel rushed. I thought they did an extremely good job on it, but
Feels like the other way around. Actually, watching the special.
yeah,
Like the special was rushed to meet Undiscovered Country or something.
Right.
yeah. They were in post-production of the movie at the time this aired, but clearly some of the interviews were taken from the set of Undiscovered Country, so they must have known they were going to do something.
It definitely looked like, at least and I think Shatner and Nimoy are great on it. Shatner is just tongue-in-cheek the whole time, which is, I mean, in a good way. Like, he's
Right.
like, I'm here to have fun
Yeah.
because this is great. Thanks for, he even does pretty much I didn't see you there at the beginning.
You see my first note there?
Is that what yours was?
Directorial choice, Shatner's troll and intro.
Yeah.
Like the
Oh.
camera flew in with
Hello.
him and like joined him when he met
Nimoy.
sitting.
And
at the
Nimoy
place,
is
yeah.
super amiable, of course, because that's just who he was. But
But a lot more serious.
yeah, so the sports part of the podcast, it reminded me of one of those things like, Well, we're in a rain delay here. In the meantime, watch the Star Trek 25th Anniversary special. And we'll be back in about 15 minutes. We'll let you know if the rain stopped or whatever.
Yeah, so my first two notes actually were related to that. So I have like, why would they have them sitting in like an editing
I was just
room?
gonna ask that. Yeah, why is that their set of choice?
And I'm wondering.
I guess because they were playing a lot of clips, so you're in an editing room to pull up clips.
But I mean, you could have people sitting on it.
They didn't take the next step by having to push the button and check this out.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, sitting in a couple of chairs on a stage somewhere, or just like a screen behind them, or anything
on the bridge
to do, or that, or that.
I can't imagine that anniversary specials like this for television shows or movies were very common in those days. This was kind of like a first. Now they do them all the time. But
well, my alternate episode is the Lost in Space 25th Anniversary special.
Okay.
Which would be about 12 minutes. Not an hour and a half.
So I wondered,
not a lot of stuff making it to 25 years.
Yeah.
I wondered if my past self would have noticed the digital wipes, like the squares they have, and like the little cotton trails, and
that was super
particles.
I mean, that day, that was that's what we are.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll do another sports thing. Talking about them being in the control room, the George Michael Sports Machine was like a Sunday night sports highlight show, and it was like, here's what everything, NFL, whatever sports happened that Sunday, he's going to take you through and kind of do it through the week, and they'd have a human interest story. But he's like, check out what happened in the Phillies game, and he'd click a button or he'd pull down a switch or whatever, and it was just like, and SCTV did some spoofs of that and stuff like that, but it looked very reminiscent of that. So.
Did he ever say wham?
It would not surprise me if he did. I also, knowing it's 1991, Shatner's suit was kind of that oversized kind of cut, which my first suits I bought out of college for my first job, very similar. Yeah. And I was like, I recognize that. It's very, they call it the athletic cut, but I would think it was really just...
I assumed it was to hide,
This is your fashion.
That may have been too.
This is your fashion for the podcast.
This is fashion, yeah.
And everybody that had glasses had the huge oversized glasses with their eyes at the top.
Because I appreciated Nimoy keeping his glasses on. Like, you know what? I just want you to know I'm studious and serious. Because that's what you were then.
And Shatner took his glasses off and couldn't see anything. They opened the special with a shot of the cage, which I appreciated because that is the first. But then I jumped on my phone and I'm Googling when did the cage was first shown to the public. Because it obviously didn't air in the 60s. Right. So what I found was it was released on VHS in 1986, so 5 years prior to this. And then it aired on TV for the first time in 1988, 2 years after the VHS release. So yes, at this point, Star Trek fans would have been well versed on the cage.
I know I watched each of those releases.
So then they said this is the 25th, and then they went through montages that said 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and I'm like, you're making it feel like it's a lot longer than it is.
Right.
It should be like 60s, really 80s, and that's it. Because barely in the 70s, barely in the 90s.
I'm doing a lot of sports on this podcast this week. Sorry, guys, but there is a thing they talk about, like, I'll do a go with Gordie Howe, because he's the guy who's like, he played hockey in 5 decades, and it's like, okay. He played in the 40s. He played in the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
From 1949 to 1971.
And then he played a game in 1980, and or 1981 or whatever. And so like, okay, you got them all. Yeah, exactly.
Well, there was definitely a feeling to me now that I didn't get in the day of overstating Star Trek's importance. Especially with all the NASA stuff, but we come back after the prologue and the opening credits, and it's Kennedy giving a speech about going to the moon. And yes, Star Trek held a very important place in pop culture and in developing sci-fi. And, I'll defend how much of sci-fi owes credit to Star Trek. Sure. And yet, sitting here in 2021, it feels like you're overstating your own importance.
Yes. Yeah. I like them showing Flash Gordon in there, which I've referenced when we've talked about Star Wars coming out in 77. I was like, well, what about Flash Gordon?
Yeah.
Not even about Star Trek. Like, well, what about Flash Gordon?
And then we have Buzz Aldrin talking about how great Star Trek is and how important it is. And it's just like, Neil Armstrong must have passed.
So back toward the top, I had a quick question. They were talking about how the fans saved the show and so on. My question is, how did the fans know that the show even needed to be saved? How did things work back then?
So
it actually got canceled,
Well, Jo Trimple, BJO is the first name. She had connections on the set with the people, and then when she was told by people that worked on the show it was be canceled, then she was reaching out to all the people that she thought could help save it. So it was very much a word of mouth and using networking to get that.
And she
word
kind of
spread.
started the whole convention thing later
Yeah.
too. So
Yes.
she's huge.
It wasn't like NBC came on and said the last 3 episodes of Star
Right.
Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more of that.
Yeah, back then they did a letter writing campaign. Now we do a GoFundMe or whatever we do.
And it was fanzines. Of
Fanzines
course.
were huge. Yeah, we've talked about
mailing
that.
lists. They actually have mailing lists
Yeah.
that were
Oh, yeah.
mail lists, not
Yeah.
email.
Yeah.
Speaking of problematic things, when Roddenberry says Scots have always been shipbuilders.
we all kind of just I'm not just
Just
Love that.
who edited this thing? Well, I'm sure it was in the title, in the credits, but
We had
did that.
celebrity congratulations
We
popping
did,
in, starting with John Tesh, who of course played a Klingon.
I forgot he played a Klingon in that
Right.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as random as it seemed to me at first.
Right.
It was like, why would
It didn't seem like there were any celebrity pop-ins that didn't guest star.
Yeah.
Other than
Burnson and-
other than somebody at the end we'll talk about that Keith got all excited about, and some NASA people.
Yeah.
Did Shatner script Nimoy's comments about Star Trek V? I gotta know, because Nimoy spoke very glowingly about Star Trek V.
Yeah.
And I love Star Trek V, but I get why people don't.
Well, I mean, it seemed I wouldn't say glowing. It seemed polite, and the way you would speak about a colleague in a certain way.
Sure. He was probably hoping
Yeah.
that then they'd ask Shatner about him working on Star Trek 2
Right.
and 3.
Did not.
And they did not.
Or 3 Men and a Baby.
Yeah. I mean, that was every bit as important to the culture as Star Trek. It's just funny because shortly after Nimoy goes on all this praise about Shatner, then they switch to Shatner and he's slamming DeForest Kelly in the old age makeup. How McCoy didn't age well. So it just shows you the different personalities.
On brand.
Well, he said he was joking though. He was just like the.
Yeah, sure. Sure he was, Keith. Another thing, Roddenberry said was problematic when he's talking about all the great things they have, such as a female doctor.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. It just
And I guess-
it's like nails in a chalkboard
And
right there.
yet,
It's like
and yet in 1991, that was still like
yeah.
That's what I was going to
Big
say.
deal.
I thought about it. Like in this century, almost all my doctors have been women.
right. But,
If I have a choice.
but in 1991,
Yeah.
it was mostly
Yep.
women nurses.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Very
yeah.
few female doctors.
Yeah.
Ratio-wise, I'm
Yeah.
sure there were. If you count up numbers, it would seem
Right,
like
Right. Yeah.
When we first got the shuttle of LeVar Burton in Space Camp, I'm like, whoa, where's Geordie's visor? He looks completely different. But then he makes a reference to Michael Jackson. Which,
Oh, the moon. Oh, yeah, the moon bounce chair essentially.
Right.
The
Keith, you went to the space.
yes, talk about it.
So yeah, I mean there were various levels for various age groups. I think it was around middle school or junior high school because that's what it was when I was there. They made the transition to middle school.
Yeah.
Like right as I was getting out in Newark, Ohio, which is where I was growing.
Nurk.
Yeah. As is commonly known around the parts because of the accent that most people should have when they're growing up there, which I don't for who knows why. But anyway, so I went to Space Academy Level 1, technically. And I recognized some of the simulations they had there. And I noticed that like the underwater trainer that they had that was for older students and older levels.
Was it like a couple weeks thing, or was it just like 1 week, or?
My memory is so bad right now. It was about like a week or two, I would say.
Did you see the movie Space Camp?
I did.
Was
And
that
it is
similar?
one little thing, like the multi-axis trainer. Mentioned that's the thing that they have in the movie as well, where you sit in the chair and they have like the gyroscope around you essentially.
yeah,
You're doing
yeah.
like
You sit
all
in the big bondage. You're strapped to the bondage contraption.
It is not a bondage contraption. It is more just.
I think I've seen them in dungeons. No.
But yeah, the egg shape and the wire. Think about the way it's supposed to work is you don't get dizzy in it because they don't spin you in the same direction more than twice before flipping
You're
into something
constantly
else.
moving, yeah.
Yes, so
Okay.
your area fluid doesn't settle. One thing they put in the movie was that you had some sort of joystick that you're supposed to be able to use to get yourself out of
Yeah.
it and like wrestle. No, it's just this is supposed to like, hey, this is what it's like to be disoriented.
So when I was obsessed with Star Trek, I was like, I really want to go to space and all that. And then I learned, one, you had to have 20/20 vision,
Yep.
which there was no LASIK at that time.
Yep.
And there was no way my family could afford it anyway. So I'm like, all right, that's a check. Then it was like, I was starting to realize that motion sickness was going to be a part of my life. And then I think we've talked about my claustrophobia on this podcast. So, do all three of those things. Turns out, nope, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'll be the guy at Mission Control if I was going to do it. And of course, obviously, I failed at that too. But one other thing about the space camp, I thought the music was very Axel Foley, Harold Faltermeyer from Beverly Hills Cop.
They had some parts.
And I have to stop saying that because then we'll have to pay.
It was very 1981.
It was very 80s music.
Well, more, I would say earlier than 1991.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're there with a group of students or whatever, and you get divided up into certain classes, and they give you some orientation material, and then they give you tests, like written tests, like, hey, what'd you learn? And so based on that, I ended up being the commander for some of the missions, the simulated missions we're on. They gave us like 2 missions, and the other one I was just like the science officer, essentially.
Of course.
Is there video?
Did you wear ears?
I wish.
You wish there was video? Or you wish you had ears?
Ears,
Both.
yes.
Was there video?
I don't remember. I feel like there might have been. Oh my God, there probably was, and I just don't remember where it is. It's probably somewhere in my house. And I did go to the one in Huntsville. I think there's probably one in Houston as well or something, right?
Yeah.
It's either I go to that one. No, if I go to that, I'm just going to throw up all week. So I'm going to go to the Mets fantasy camp instead.
My extended family was mostly from Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Probably still is, essentially.
Oh, so that makes sense then. Yeah. It was funny, shortly after the Michael Jackson reference, Denise Crosby talked about touching the child in all of us, which I know from a modern perspective. They weren't like right next to each other, which would have been even funnier, but
everyone looked really young.
Yeah.
So, and obviously it's 30 years ago, so of course they look young.
They were still making movies.
Yeah. And of all of them, of course, Ricardo Montalban looked the best.
Yeah.
He was probably 70 or something by then. He looked amazing.
Elizabeth Keller didn't look as young.
You mean Sally Kellerman?
Sally Kellerman.
I was like, wait a minute,
sorry. But the character was Elizabeth.
She mentions, and I'll see you in the home at her 50th, but she's 84 now, and she's still getting around.
Yeah, why would she say see you in the home? Call me at the home.
Yeah, call me. I'll be at the home or something.
Right.
I think back then...
She meant her home?
She was like, when I'm 79, I will be in the...
You think that's what she meant?
Yeah. I'll be in the home is what I thought.
I thought she meant like, I'll be at my home, call me. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought she was tripping up, like she was like, I'll be at the house, I'll be at that. People do that, like sort of thing.
I thought it was very much.
Because she was only like 50 when she filmed that, so.
She'd have been, she's 84 now, so she'd have been.
Or I thought she might have had an accent.
54.
Yeah.
Or something like she was singing with a second language.
LeVar Burton ends the whole space camp segment talking about how Starfleet is even more advanced than NASA, and I'm like, duh. You don't need to. None of this is relevant to Starfleet training.
It felt like, certainly for the time, they were overstating the scientific accuracy of what they were doing in Star Trek because they weren't even. Cellular telephone was all you needed to say.
Well, and cellular phones were just starting to be a thing.
Well, they had moved from the car phone to an actual cell phone, but it still was not affordable to anybody.
Right. Well, around this time was when a guy I worked with, my first job out of college, he moved to Houston not long after. He's like, and he was working on his master's in engineering or whatever. I'm like, well, what are you working on? He's like, oh, it's this thing where no matter where you go, you have the same phone number. I was like, wow, whoa. That is insane. What are you talking about? And, obviously...
I think I heard somebody mention like a desktop Macintosh computer and things like that. And thinking back then, because that's right in the study when I went to college. And I just started like around 91, 92.
Yeah. I
had like a Mac Plus going in, and then our campus was so advanced because a lot of the students had Macintosh computers in their room, and then we had like a wide
room.
Yeah, wide area network, so we could like.
Did it take up half of your room? Was that your roommate? Was the computer?
No.
We're going to pick it on.
But seriously, for the people at home, this was around the time when desktop computers were becoming more popular for people to be able to afford and have for their students and so forth.
I think I had a desktop compuder in this era, so yes.
Well, and they referenced sickbay, the diagnostic thing, and they kind of jumped over, and maybe we still weren't there yet, but like, the way the sickbay has the heart and all that. I mean, when you're in the hospital, there's a machine.
Yeah, it's just not part of your bed. It's like rolling cart next to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's that same kind of thing.
Someday we'll be able to move it from the rolly cart to a screen above your bed. and reduce the colors, the number of colors.
Yes.
They talk about the Oxford Dictionary had even added Trekkie, and they better update it to Trekker now.
Right.
That Trekker was like a fad for what, like 3 or 4 years, and then it just disappeared?
When I as a kid, there was always a big distinction between Trekkies and Trekkers. Trekkies were the guys in the years at the convention. Trekkers were the serious people, the smart people, like me, who were better than those other people. I think at some point, Trekkers were just like, whatever, I'm a Trekkie, sure, call me that, I don't care. Yeah, whatever. I'm a fan, and I'm still better than you. So, but yeah, at one point it was an insult to be called a Trekkie.
It was, but I never had that distinction of Trekkie, Trekker like that.
Yeah, I was definitely like, oh, I'm a Trekker.
But yeah, Trekkers, that went away pretty quickly.
Fortunately, no one ever asked me. They were just like, you're a geek, you love Star Trek, stay away from me.
Yeah.
So, during that period. But,
just this.
Except my dad, I would always correct him.
This sort of tied into Roddenberry again, saying, "I have a black, I have blacks."
Yeah,
it made me think about that during I got a little distracted with the whole Trekkie Trekker thing. It is very much like, I don't want to say political correctness or the concept of it or the way people see it in negative lights, and it ends up really being. It's not the word so much as how people use it and say it. Yeah. It's not that Roddenberry was saying black or Trekkie or whatever. It's that people are trying to escape that disdain or awkwardness or scorn in the voice of the people saying it. And they try to run from by using different words, but when it comes down to it eventually, that's what happened. It's just like Trekker or Trekkie, it doesn't matter because it became more mainstream or socially acceptable. And people began to understand more. It wasn't so much like a ew, Trekkie. It's just
it wasn't used in the pejorative sense.
Yes.
What also occurred to me is back then you really picked one fandom and committed to it, and nowadays we're all part of how many different fandoms.
Right.
So we don't say we're a Potterite or we're a Marvel.
You're right.
Whatever. We're just like we all like all the nerd stuff.
So people have had to find different ways to be a snob.
Right.
About how they're better.
Right.
I
was a Trekkie since 1988.
Yeah, exactly. Or they have to do it actually. Well, actually.
So in that sense, you say the pejorative also becomes more of like a badge of honor. Right. It's like I was a Trekkie when Trekkie was like a thing to be hated.
I was, like Barbara Vandrell said in the early 80s, I was country when country wasn't cool.
Yeah. But then they made the movie Trekkies and Trekkies 2, and then I thought you were going to tell me they made a movie, I was country when country wasn't cool. No. I need to watch this. I don't know about that, but they have the movie Trekkies about fans. Yes. And then they made a second one.
And there's the movie Fanboys too, which has the Trek versus.
There's a handful of movies.
I think it was fictional though, Fanboys.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
They talk about the official Star Trek fan club and how they just kept adding all these people, and I'm like, that fan club folded like 20 years ago. Yeah. But okay, it makes me sad. Yeah, because I used to subscribe to the Star Trek Communicator, which was the official fan club magazine, and when this aired, it wasn't even called the Communicator yet. It was still called the official Star Trek fan club magazine. And shortly after this, I think they updated to be the Communicator. Yeah. And then that folded completely, and then there was no official Star Trek magazine in the U.S. for a few years. And then Britain had one that had been going on for like 100 issues, and they brought it over to the U.S. and started the numbering over at number 1 for us, but kept going in Britain. Same magazines, but it was like number 1 here, number 120 over there. And now they've moved the production to the U.S., so Britain's getting it later. So we stole their official magazine when we lost ours. After a few years of not having one.
You can tell because color is spelled without a U. You can tell when the change happened.
It's funny. And actually, just before Communicator folded and the fan club folded, there was a second official Star Trek magazine that was a limited run. I think I have every single issue of it, including the 4 they only released in test markets like Columbus before they went nationwide with the magazine. So that's pretty cool.
I thought at one time I was in that club, and maybe I was, but I can't say for certain. I definitely was in some official Star Trek clubs. I don't know if I was in that one for sure.
There were several stories in this special that are stories I've repeated and talked to you guys about on the podcast, and we've seen it repeated elsewhere. The Nichelle Nichols MLK story, a quick version of it. The Klingon to be or not to be. I would always talk about how there was no verb to be in Klingon.
I'd forgotten that one.
The stuff like that, those things really solidified in my mind for sure. They also started talking to the Oregon Museum of Science Industry or something, was building their traveling exhibit at this time, but it wasn't done yet. And I did come when it traveled to Cincinnati, and it was at the
wow.
Cincinnati Museum.
Yeah.
And there were like little panels you could play with. There were props and costumes. There was an interactive thing where that episode of the original series where the rocks are falling.
Yeah.
On the you like had to avoid them, and there was a screen in front of you and a green screen behind you, and you were like, There weren't any like cool rock. I did get a Star Trek Vegas when it first, not long after it first opened. Never did do the Board redesign.
Is that still there?
No.
Okay.
They did a Board redesign after about 10 years, and then they folded it about 5 years after that.
I think I almost went. I was out there once, and we talked about going over there. It's like, do we want to go over there? And we did.
When I was 15 or 16 years old, my dad had been traveling a lot for work, and he made a comment in front of my mom of, honey, I've got these flight miles that are going to expire that are free flights. We should go to Vegas. And I said, the Star Trek experience is there. And I didn't get along with my dad growing up, but he was like, okay, I'll take you. So it was just me and my dad.
Yeah.
My mom stayed home with the other 4 kids, and we spent 3 days in Vegas, and we went to Star Trek experience and a bunch of other stuff.
Wow.
So I am very fortunate to get that trip because obviously I didn't make it back again before it closed.
Oh.
And I happened to be
back home from he just left you there.
And I happened to be in London, England on a band tour in college when our band went traveling there in 2002 when Star Trek, what did they call it? Because Star Trek The Experience was Vegas. Star Trek something was touring, and it was in Hyde Park. And it was similar to The Experience, but it was more of a traveling thing, and I got to go see it in Hyde Park in London.
Oh, wow.
Which was awesome. So I've got a few lucky Star Trek things. But the Oregon thing, I had a t-shirt for a while that said Borg and Klingons and Tribbles Oh My or something like that. It was 3 of the alien races. It was pretty cool.
How did that compare to what they were showing you with the simulations, like beaming up and so on?
The beaming wasn't part of what I went to.
That was was that not Universal?
It seemed like a Universal Studios.
Yeah, that was something else. That was the Paramount Park
in LA.
Yeah, I didn't go to that. I didn't get to go to that. They did in Star Trek Experience in Vegas do a fake beaming thing, which was cool, where they're ushering you into this room to like go through a Star Trek exhibit, and then all of a sudden the lights go out and you hear a whoosh and you hear the transport sounds. When the lights come back up, you're standing on the transporter pad. And I, for the life of me, could not figure out how I was in a bare room and now I'm standing on the transporter pad because I didn't move. But I went online and I saw how they did it behind the scenes and everything. And then they usher you immediately from the transport pad into a turbo lift. You go on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Jonathan Frakes pops up as Riker and he's like, hurry, you gotta escape. And the Klingon ship shoots at you. You get back in the other turbo lift, go down, they put you on a shuttle, and then that's the ride they did in Vegas where you're like flying in the shuttle.
Nice.
And then you crash through the roof, and then you go back in time, crash through the roof of Las Vegas Hilton, end up in the basement, and when you get out of the shuttle, they have some guy dressed as a janitor. How'd you get down here? And I'll show you back up. And then you could go have a drink at Quark's Bar, which they built in its entirety from Deep Space Nine at Star Trek Vegas.
I know.
It was so
Kings Island here in Ohio had when they became a Paramount Park.
Something like that.
They had some kind of Star Trek.
They had
thing,
Klingons walking around. I don't know if they ever had a ride.
I think that's all I remember.
I wasn't thinking Star Trek. It's something, but it felt like I was about to mention Kings Island. Like
they had different
properties like that.
Yes.
Certain
Now that
movies
there's a Batman ride.
Now that Star Wars and Avengers have their own worlds and Harry Potter have their own worlds at theme parks, we are so overdue for a Star Trek actual full experience world.
Galaxy's Edge is the Star Wars, and Star Trek should be something.
We need something. So one of the Caribbean resorts or wherever you vacation should just theme itself for Ryza.
Yeah. I wrote down Whoopi talk.
Whoopi was great.
So
every time she talked, I was like, I loved her quotes in this.
She was great, but specifically Roddenberry talking about how they got Whoopi. They were going to cast the most beautiful woman.
And luckily Whoopi called us.
So that was the conversation we had watching.
Was he saying she was?
Or was he saying Whoopi is the most?
I think he was saying she was.
Like I said, she does look great. She is great.
She still looks great. She's awesome.
Yeah.
I love Whoopi. Yeah. They talked about the Next Generation episode process, how they built the episodes, and now maybe that was novel back in the day. Nowadays, I'm like, that sounds like every other network show's process.
Yeah, I thought it was cool to see because it is going to. And I had the same thought, but I thought it was cool to see, like, okay, because we've talked about it a lot, like, oh, well, you're doing that grind. Mm-hmm. Roddenberry talked about it on there, and that's why some shows, they cut corners on effects or costumes, or this is what they even. Shira mentioned, hey, how come you guys never land it? Well, we can't figure out how to land the ship. That's why we beam them down.
Which he had always said was a budget thing, but whatever.
Right.
No, but in this special, Roddenberry said to me, we can't figure out how to land it. I'm like, but in other interviews, he said it was budget.
I think what he meant was we couldn't figure out how to do it within the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and I I never went to a convention either. I've talked about on here. I had neighbors who they made a lot of toys that were effects, and for the Marcon here in Columbus.
You never been to a Trek convention at all?
No, and as a kid, I wanted to go. I thought a couple times I had my dad talked into it, but it just wasn't going to happen. Neighbors would, though, the convention would kind of come to them. So I think I've talked about there were a few years where we had a lot of Klingons next door, and then by 7 or 8 years later, by the time before I moved, the last party was more of like, or actually before my neighbors moved, the last party was more of like witches and vampires and that kind of stuff. So it kind of, the convention kind of transitioned from a Star Trek thing to that. I mean, I'm sure there's still Star Trek people.
Well, Marcon, yeah, is more
Marcon, yeah.
Multiple alternative realities.
Yeah,
So it's like a very general.
The only Star Trek convention I've been to was they did one in like the conference room of a Holiday Inn in Columbus somewhere back in the 90s. I think Robert Picardo was the only like main Star Trek actor there. And then I think Josh Carey, who was also in Voyager as a reoccurring part, was there, and that was like it. And, but I did talk about, and we will watch the video highlights of Kate Mulgrew's political event she had for her husband when he ran for governor of Ohio. That was out in Cleveland. Because it was like a 6-hour event, but they've got a DVD that's like 90 minutes of highlights from the event.
We can show that at our It's All Been Trek Before convention.
There we go.
Coming later this year, or later next year, depending on when we do this. Yeah, we'll get to the details.
It depends on how well the letter writing campaign goes.
This episode's going
to.
This episode will hit the podcast feed probably early March 2022.
All right, yeah. So by 2023, we'll have everything all lined up.
Okay, you're in charge of that.
Scheduled to appear, us. So far.
Tell me when to show up and I'll be there.
So far, we're scheduled to appear. I don't want to overcommit us.
No, I'll show up, but I'm not doing any of the organization work. So you let me know where to be.
We'll try really hard to get Jimmy-Jerome to show up. And
we should do a joint convention with the Greatest Gen guys.
Yeah, that's sure. Yeah. Hey, can you guys just give us a room? And for the VIP thing, you can get your picture taken with all of us.
Sure. Yeah. Or just buy me a drink. Or I think any of us just buy us a drink.
You could be the person that gets to have that drink with us that we talk about.
Yeah. We'll record It's All Been Trekked in the bar. We'll just keep the microphone running for 6 hours straight.
Yeah. We'll talk about what you're wearing and,
And then how annoying you are.
And we'll tell you to live long and prosper and get out of here.
Yeah.
So Rick Berman, we just said something about a Star Wars film. Yeah. Was that him slamming Star Wars?
I don't know, because I
feel like he's an executive producer. It could have been intentional.
Well, especially in that point, it had been a while since it had been a Star Wars. They showed a couple of the blooper reels from the old.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that at the conventions, that was one of the staples that brought it down.
Yeah.
And there's they're probably on YouTube by now, but there were like 7 or 8 different versions. Every time they found new.
In the 70s, they'd show that, and then they'd show a couple episodes because Roddenberry would bring the reels with him.
Yeah, the literal reel.
Yeah.
How long were the reels usually? I mean,
I'm guessing like 15 or 20 minutes maybe, but...
For the bloopers?
Yeah.
Because he had a full episode. I would assume that's just one reel, but I don't know. There was a brief Redemption 2 scene, Part 2 scene, which had aired the week before this, but we haven't seen Redemption Part 2 yet, so that was a little bit of a spoiler.
I blocked it out, luckily.
The one behind-the-scenes guy, I can't remember which one, was talking about how Mike Okuda came up with the Geordie's visor, and he called it a barrette instead of a barrette.
Yes.
But Mike Okuda, if you don't know who he is, you should know who he is. He designed all of the graphics, besides designing most of the props. Every graphic you see in Next Gen on DS9 Voyager, like all the Elcar design and everything is all him. And then he married Denise, I don't know what her maiden name was, but
Crosby.
Denise Okuda, who was I think she was like a script editor or something. And then the two of them and Michael Jan Friedman wrote like the Star Trek Encyclopedia and kept putting out all this technical stuff after Star Trek ended. So they really were like the go-to. Like they had the encyclopedia in their head, but then they also put out the literal Star Trek Encyclopedia,
That's cool.
as well as designing all that stuff. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Mike Okuda is somebody I would totally nerd out over meeting.
My note, I didn't really know the significance, and the name sounded familiar, but I was saying, I can't help but judge people by how well they're speaking when you see things like this. Yeah. And I put down Rick Berman and Mike Okuda seemed really credible and competent when they were speaking. So yeah.
Even though Berman said a Star Wars.
It was hard to tell if that was like a genuine kind of like I'm a stiff, I don't really know, or it was like an inside joke.
It seemed like both of them saying that was self-sabotage. Yeah, is what I would say.
I really thought Berman was just trying to do a subtle slam.
Yeah,
I feel like he would know better. Mike Okuda did talk about the medical case they built for Crusher for the 5th season where the tricorder pops out. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah.
Wait, so also on that subject, I think Stephen made a note of the woman who was speaking before them.
Oh, yes.
Who seemed really serious at first. Yeah, I was like,
But then she was all business, but she
knew her stuff.
She knew her stuff, yeah.
Well, you know those museum people. They do their research.
Marianne something is what I...
Maryland.
Something. Was she from the New Hampshire somethings?
No. She... near the end, they started talking about the actual space program and building a space source so they could build the shuttles out there. And just made me think of how awesome that would be, because that would be the greatest NASA footage ever. It'd be even bigger than Land on the Moon to me, because we all love dry dock porn.
Yeah.
Whenever the Enterprise leaves, so they just show the shuttle leaving. Oh, it's been refurbished. That's awesome.
Well, they mentioned the letter writing campaign that got the first NASA shuttle named Enterprise, which we talked about before, I think. The Tin Man story of how they just recorded somebody digesting pizza in their belly. I'd forgotten that one. That's a good story. Disgusting if you think about it while you're watching the episode, but a good story.
Why pizza? Why any, just...
Something that gets your digestive system really active, I guess.
Yeah. I only have one more note, and it's they got to that final montage where they were kind of talking about, what Star Trek is, and it's made 50 years, and blah, blah, blah. But then we end up seeing Vina. We see Kirk kissing, I think, Edith Keeler. We see a couple other on-screen kisses. A lot of the beautiful women of Star Trek, which just takes me back to what I say every few episodes or so, that sex is a part of Star Trek.
Oh, yeah. But they put the sex stuff in the humor clips.
Yeah, they did, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
The humor clip was a weird... Well, there was a sense of humor, and then it really...
There was funny things at the beginning and the end, but the middle of the montage was not humorous.
But I appreciated them being like, by the way, Vina is part of this heritage. It's like, damn right it is.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, dang right it is.
They talked about Next Gen having a budget of over $1 million per episode, and that's in $80s dollars or early $90s dollars. That, I guess I didn't realize it was that much, but when they talked about how many hundreds of man hours went into those very simple space shots, I was like, oh, no wonder the space shots are so rare and simple.
I liked it because when he said, well, there's so much money goes into these, but really we're about the stories. I'm like, good save, good save. And as we talk about it, it's like, I feel like the effect shots you only notice if they're bad.
Yeah.
Although we do recognize when they look good, but if the story sucks, then we really notice, and we're gonna kill it. But I don't know that they made the show with us in mind. Us podcasting about it in mind.
No, it was supposed to be watched once. Well, they knew at that point it's syndication and be seen in reruns, but they still didn't foresee binging seasons in order.
Right.
Yeah. They talk about the USSR and Klingons, the parallel, which was interesting. A lot of Star Trek 6 spoilers. You said it made you excited for the movie because you haven't seen it. Yeah. And I love that movie. So
and
I got all energized
again.
And just from what they showed, it's like you really got excited.
I was getting excited. It's a good trailer. Yeah. I'm ready to see it. I will probably forget enough of that before then. I won't forget about Iman.
So earlier, Walter Koenig. I remember we were talking about something, and we noticed him say jaundiced. I thought maybe you caught. What was the context? What was he talking about?
I think he was talking about prejudice, but he said jaundiced.
I was like, what?
I think he just used the wrong word.
I thought he was talking about getting jaded.
Maybe that could have been too. Yeah. Jaundice was not the right word. But they left it in. Keith, the excitement on your face when Dan Quayle came on screen. Wow. What was that about? You got to explain.
Oh my god.
Because you were like,
It was semi-ironic. I wanted to make sure we heard what he was going to say. It's like, oh my god, look,
was he your favorite vice president?
Probably not. Probably. No, it seemed odd. I remember them mentioning him at the top of the
He was the sitting VP at the time this aired.
Right. So I'll say there's nothing terribly good or bad or embarrassing about what he said on it. It was fine. It was just the associations you have from the more famous things that.
All I remember about Dan Quayle was that America's Funniest Home Videos clip where Bob Saget was like, "Where there's a bush, there's a quail." There was like a quail running out of a bush.
Wow.
That's about the extent. That everybody talked about how dumb Dan Quayle was. That's about the extent of what I know.
The potato thing was pretty much.
Oh yeah, he was also from Indiana, so just like Pence. But
they talked about plans for the space station Freedom in this thing and how it was being built. So I looked it up because I was like, we have a space station. Was that Freedom? So Reagan ordered and approved the budget to build a space station called Freedom. And we worked with Europe and Japan and some other power, I can't remember the fourth one, on the space station. And over again, Congress kept slashing the budget, and every time they took away capabilities from the station that were important, until finally, in the 90s, under Bill Clinton, they had a vote to cancel the space station completely, and by one vote, it was saved to not get canceled completely, but they'd already cut so much out of the space station, they're like, this really isn't worth it. So we partnered with Russia, added Russia to the mix, and built the ISS. So Freedom never happened, but the plans we built ended up transitioning into the International Space Station.
Good research.
Yeah. But, of course, Congress screwed it up. Thankfully, they saved it by the one vote. It was probably John McCain. I don't know. No, it wasn't John McCain, I'm sure.
And Gene Roddenberry was talking about the possibility of there being another project and so on. And
kudos to them for using good interviews with Roddenberry when we saw that spring him having trouble cutting the cake.
Yeah.
Roddenberry is in charge.
This special was very much Roddenberry is in charge. I think we heard more from him than anybody else. That everybody had glowing things to say about him, and
Which
and his
makes
vision.
sense if you're looking at the legacy of it. I mean,
And he was still alive when this aired. I'm sure he watched it. So what a great way to go out on your career and your life to see this tribute to what you've built.
Well, I meant specifically, he was talking about the things that they had to say to him to convince him to do it.
Right.
One of them was
Next Gen.
You'll be
in control.
Yeah.
And so he says, and
Yep.
I am in charge.
Because he didn't want to lose another family.
After all the fighting he had to do on the first.
Yeah.
First.
With the network.
Oh.
So there wasn't a network. And he said he lost a family over long hours.
Yeah.
The only time we ever hear about the pre-Magellan family.
Yes. Yeah.
Was he?
He was married before Magellan, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure he ever married Magellan.
Yeah. He married
That's
Magellan.
where Rod.
And that's where Rod Roddenberry.
Yeah.
And there's a Eugene, I think, too.
Yeah.
They added Roddenberry at the end of this VHS, and I told you guys I was remembering that at the end it was like Roddenberry, whatever, to 1991, and I was surprised when I looked this up and saw that it aired in September and he died in October, so they must have added that just for the VHS, the little tribute screen. I did not look up the writer or director of this, even though I know there was one.
I saw them go by, but I didn't.
They were not names I recognized, and if they're important, we'll put something about them in later.
Posthumously.
Well, I'd look it up right now, but my phone's recording us, so... Yeah, it'll be on the DVD release.
The VHS release.
We're not releasing a VHS, Keith. We're releasing it on an 8-track.
Betamax.
8-track. The alternate episode, you already had one.
Yeah, mine is the Lost in Space 25-year retrospective, in which case they actually made it... Whenever that Lost in Space remake, I think I was after 30 years or whatever. But.
My alternate episode was Shatner comes on here, and then the rest of the cast does a surprise intervention where they tell him how horrible he was. Like, you're coming to film this 25th anniversary. No, you're coming for us to tell you off.
Well, no, we're doing that special episode later. It's Galaxy Quest. So.
Which I just saw an article recently where Shatner's like, I don't know what they were trying to do. I don't know what Tim Allen was playing. I don't recognize that character at all. And then Patrick Stewart's like, yeah, I saw it. I laughed so much. It was such a funny movie. I got exactly what they were going for. Wait, Shatner...
I wonder if he was tongue-in-cheek when he said that.
I don't know if he was tongue-in-cheek or just in denial.
Yeah.
But he was not... He was talking about... He did not see it at all.
Yeah.
Huh.
But... Who was your annoyance of the special?
Me and Keith, because we kept talking and making you pause.
I'm sorry.
But we couldn't help it.
I wasn't annoyed by it.
I know. And you weren't annoying me either, Keith. I was annoying me. Again, pulling back that curtain. We haven't done these in person ones, and that's some of the stuff we've missed personally.
Yes,
I know you guys don't have to put up with this generally, but...
No, I love watching it with you guys.
But yeah, it just creates those moments, and lots of times we're saving it for the podcast, but sometimes... So you end up getting about half of it. My other one was just the fact that Dan Quayle was vice president once. So I'm going to give it to Dan Quayle.
I'm going to second Dan Quayle for his politics, not for anything he said.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And because I didn't find anybody else about this annoying.
I mean, in a sense, it's like, he was kind of amiable. But I also know if you went back and look at the policies he was pushing forward, those weren't amiable at all.
No. I guess that's just, you had to go with the current administration at the time.
Yeah.
I'll go with maybe the NASA tie-ins or something. Or the way they were trying to we're so realistic because...
That's a good one. Who do you want to have a drink with?
I started with The Great Bird of the Galaxy, Gene Roddenberry. Then I went to...
He's dead, you know.
Yeah. Well, this may affect... Because I don't know if our girl Mary Ann Smithsonian...
I think it was Mary Lynn.
Mary Lynn?
Yeah.
If it's Mary Lynn, I think I'd go with her. But she seemed older than my early pick.
We pick people that are dead, I'm sure, all the time. True. So
you know what? I'm probably going to stick with her, but I was very persuaded by the woman talking about jewelry at the convention.
Mm.
She, you know what? That's... To be honest, I ended up buying her a drink. And, yeah.
I almost went with Mike Okuda because I got so excited to see him, and I love him. But I'm going to have to go with Whoopi because I felt like she had all the best quotes of any actor they
I thought about Whoopi, too, because that would be a fun
Any actor they talked to, she had the best stuff, material.
And I would be sure she has great stories about a lot
of... Oh, absolutely.
I mean, before she was a celebrity, she had great stories, and now she probably has great stories about celebrities.
It would definitely be Mary Lynn, because I would say to her, two topics. First of all...
Okay, I feel this coming. Go ahead.
First was, yes, people probably misspell your name like Mary Ann's, like my wife's name all the time.
Sure.
I'm sure that would really win her over.
Sure. That's probably what makes her such a hardliner about.
Yeah. And
she'd be like, I don't get it. Why is that funny?
and the topic of space being cold and lonely.
Oh, that's what won me over.
Yeah, I would say, you ever see that Rick and Morty episode with the space snakes? Now try to turn her on to space jazz or snake jazz.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, so that would be the.
He was great.
The Patrick Stewart interviews were interesting. It was interesting to see
Him sweat so much.
Yeah.
Well, the contrast between the way he conducted himself as opposed to the other actors, it was almost like stricter than his own character.
Yeah.
It felt so stiff for not like stiff like unlikable, but just very formal and.
Where do we want to rank this in terms of other anniversary specials?
So far, number one with a bullet.
I find it last.
I'm putting it at number 25. It is the 25th best anniversary special.
I want you to show me the other 24 anniversary specials you're talking about. Yeah. We are going to review the 30th in 5 years. And I think there was a 50th of some sort we're going to look at. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's... these are just moments in time where Star Trek was at the height of its popularity, and it's interesting to go back for what you see the actors and the producers and in a way the public's view of Star Trek at this point. Yeah. So it's useful in that regard as a time capsule. As far as comparing it to an episode of Star Trek or something, it would not rank very high. No. But yeah, I liked it.
It's still better than the end of the clip show.
It is better than Shades of Grey. It's definitely better than Shades of Grey. It's definitely better than yesterday's Enterprise.
Tomorrow's yesterday.
Whatever. You're right. It is tomorrow's yesterday.
Great.
Yeah. You're right. Yesterday's Enterprise is better than this. I misspoke. Thank you for fixing that. Tomorrow's yesterday, the original series episode. You know what I meant.
I did.
I didn't.
So, I don't know if we'll be... Our next episode is going to be the Season 5 premiere in a couple of weeks after we finish our hiatus. I don't know if we're going to do that live in person or on Zoom, but one of those two things. If you haven't enjoyed the audio quality of returning to the live and in person, I'd say a good number of our episodes will probably still be on Zoom. So even if we do the premiere live and in person, which we may or may not, you're going to get more Zoom. Keep coming back. Write in at jim@iabdpresents.com. Tell us, do you prefer the mic setup here or the Zoom? I do think from editing this, it was a weird adjustment to go back to editing this type of audio.
I'll bet.
And I'm already thinking about, we're getting ready to move houses, that when we move to the next one, I need a better audio setup than the Zoom mic in the middle of the three of us.
Right.
So we may get an upgrade on the equipment. But for now, I would say live long.
Become a Patreon supporter so that we can upgrade our video equipment.
Yes.
I have to go visit Sally Kellerman at the home and prosper.
Send our regards to her.
I will.
I was gonna squeeze in a letter writing campaign in there somewhere about the.
So we don't cancel. It's all been tricked before.
Yes.
Send that to 123 Star Trek Way.
Star Trek.
Bakersfield, California.
1701. Hey.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?